Welcome, everybody, to the Dirty South Security Podcast. This is your co-host, Tony UV, here with Kofi for another edition of Real Talk for the Dirty South. We are joined today by the one and only Ira Wrinkler, current CISO of CYE Security, an Israeli-based company that has a multitude of great products. He's a renowned author of a couple different books. He's got You Can Stop Stupid, which that title right there is totally amazing. The other one that he has, he's got a multiple of one that you can check out, but the other one is related to cybersecurity for dummies, if I recall correctly. Is that correct, Ira?
Security awareness for dummies, and then cybersecurity all in one for dummies.
There you go. Ira, pleasure to have you on. How you been?
Life is good, and thanks for having me.
Well, we love to have you. We like to spice things up. The cybersecurity podcast that we do here at the Dirty South, by the way, we like to get dirty. We like to get very much jump into the topics that we have. And we have a good one today around hot takes on cybersecurity trends that are reshaping the industry. But before we get started, I do want to catch up with you on something that was of interest to me. I met you in New York, and we were talking about CISOs on a boat. Can you walk me through what's going on with this?
So basically, I created a concept called CruiseCon. So everybody go to cruisecon.com, spelt exactly how you would think. And essentially, I've had a great career, includes positions like Chief Security Architect at Walmart, Chief Security Strategist at HP. And I would get invited to some really, really awesome events that VCs and other people put on and things like that. And I kept thinking, here I am with like Fortune 100 CISOs and the like. And I'm thinking, this is pretty awesome, running around the deserts of Israel and like playing the Amazing Race and things like that. But to network and become friends with these people. And on top of that, there'd be some really awesome speakers. And what I thought was, why is this just reserved for the people who probably need it least?
Right.
And so I created a concept called CruiseCon, where I have the elite speakers using my friends and connections.
Yes.
And on an environment that's conducive for networking, enjoying, because these events are not just for technical, like, the CISO events are not just for technical, topics, but also personnel development, professional development and the like.
Right.
So a program together that has some outstanding A+ list speakers on professional development, personal development, and the technology.
Right.
And in a venue, I mean, everybody keeps referring to it as a cruise. The cruise itself is awesome, but the reality is that's an environment where people are there to network. And it's not just to be able to go off and say, hey, I'm on a vacation, because it's definitely not. You're there for enjoying yourself, learning, and networking with your peers. And this is something that hasn't been available to the average people before. And the fact that cruise line and everything, all the better. But that's what people at the CISO, Fortune 200 level are used to anyway. So why are they the only people getting it when they don't need it as much?
I see this as the first of many. So best of luck to you. Again, share that URL one more time so people can check it out.
Cruisecon.com. CRUISECON.com.
That's awesome.
Con, like DEF CON,
right?
ERCOM, CruiseCon. Anyway.
Exactly. Well, I see that as the first of many. Before we get started, what body of water is this projected to take in?
Oh, this is going on the Caribbean. It leaves Orlando area down to Cozumel to the Bahamas, and while we have the 2 days at seas is when the content's being held.
That's awesome. That sounds awesome. Yeah. Well, great, Kofi. What do you think about that? Are you going to join this? Are you up for that? Taking a cruise with a bunch of CISOs?
Yeah, man. I would love to do that. So I'll link up with Ira after this podcast and then get more information on how to get on that cruise.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get started. Today's a hot one. We want to talk a little bit more on a macro side, right? On the cybersecurity trends that are reshaping the industry today. It's about to be 2025 in a couple of months. First point that we want to dive in, and we're glad we have someone like you, Ira. You're a veteran. You're a multiple advisor to multiple different companies. You're in the hot seat as a CISO. first topic that we have is around talent. Now, the big talent debate is, are we oversupplied? Are we undersupplied? You see a lot of propaganda on both. What are your take on that? And then we'll go to Kofi.
So the word propaganda is accurate. That's probably the best word I haven't used yet on the subject. Because, you're looking and saying, oh, there's a million openings. ISC squared, if you look on my LinkedIn profile, I was at their security congress. I go every year. And their CEO was touting the million vacancies that are open, how they're going to fill with entry level positions. And that offended me. And the reason is because there's so many really, really talented people who have been out of work for 6 months or more.
Yes.
And to hear them get up and tout, we want to bring in entry level people. And unfortunately, I talk to these people and they hear it and they're like, what the fuck is wrong with me if there's a million openings and I can't get one?
Right.
I'm sitting there like, in the first place, the problem is there's nothing wrong with you. The problem is the million openings is a bunch of bullshit. And tell me if I can't curse on your thing. That's your prerogative. But
Dirty South.
We'll get it on the back end.
Yeah. And the reality is that these people, when I looked at it, and then I said, I'm going to write an open letter to LinkedIn. I told one of my friends, and apparently they knew people on the ISC Square board, and they came to me and said, and then they said, there's a study coming out, which is where we got the numbers, and we'll send you the study. And ISC Squared replied to my, I did a post, which was frankly a fairly neutral post initially. And they said, well, and the ISC Squared responded, well, here's data or something that summarizes our study we're releasing. And I read it. I'm like, wait a second, this doesn't say what you say it is. It's almost like the, Inigo Montoya, I can't pronounce his name, from Princess Bride. You keep using that word. I don't think that word means what you think it means.
Right.
And it's like there weren't a million openings. They kind of sort of extrapolate that they need a million people to solve the problem in theory, or 5 million jobs or whatever it is. But then when you look at the data, you look at who actually is hiring. You look at the number of openings, and it actually says there's going to be shrinkage in the whole profession. Where, for example, ISC Squared says we need 1 million new people, but yet you look at the data that's in their reports, and it actually says that 65% of organizations intend to decrease the number of entry level and junior people that are needed, or that they will hire. Maybe they say, well,
I have it here that says here, and I really enjoyed your post this morning, or whenever you wrote. I think it was like yesterday, but you said 56% of companies expected to decrease managers, 48% to decrease mid managers, and 42% will decrease executives. Only 30% of orgs seem to expect to hire additional staff, and that rate is 25% for entry level people, to all the points that you just mentioned.
Yeah, and that's the problem. They're coming up with these numbers. Well, we think we're not secure because we don't have people with the positions. And that's like, okay, I think, bad example today, but I think McDonald's needs more cashiers to properly serve me. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean they're going to hire them.
Right. Yeah.
And so what they're saying is, well, there's kind of sort of a need, but nobody's really hiring them. But we'll tell everybody there's this need. And that's
there's some obvious things, and we'll go to Kofi here for a second, because Kofi, I'm interested to get more of your perspective on this, specifically in the area of AppSec, because that's your jam, right? That's your discipline that you've had a lot of experience in on adversarial engagements. But I mean, looking at the ISC Squared or some of the similar institutions, I mean, obviously they want to be able to create the allure or the propaganda, if you will, that there is a more need, there's a backlog of open positions, so that they could basically, promote their certification programs, right? And we'll get to that in a second. But Kofi, what are you seeing on the AppSec area? A little bit more specific. Are you seeing a lot of the same of what Ira's putting down?
Yes, and I think you use the term right, the propaganda. And I think sometimes this data, it depends on the source, where it's coming from, and how it benefits a source. I mean, if it's coming from obviously a training or certificate-based organization, that's main core of revenue is based on training, then that could have a different interpretation. versus somebody in the industry who hires or recruits or do have interactions, such as ourselves with Ira, yourself, myself being, we may have different, say on that, how we view it, right? And I think viewing this shortage, I think it is still a propaganda issue. It's hard to tell whether we are understaffed or we are oversupplied or undersupplied. Some of the key areas that I don't think most of the studies have probably looked into is, has there been for the past couple of years, have there been some things, certain things change in the recruiting process? Are we seeing sometimes a misaligned expectations in some of the job descriptions? You may have a job description that would have, let's say, an entry level, and suspecting like a 20 year of experience in that particular area, right?
Yeah.
20 years ago, we used to write resumes as humans. Now we have, AI evaluating our resumes. So
and constructing them as well. Yep.
Exactly, right. So the days when we used to be able to have human beings going through our resumes and then pick and point right resources and fill positions, it's no longer there. We have now ATS who is going through our resumes, and now a lot of people are losing jobs. Are not getting the right jobs. In fact, there's a funny news about how a human resource employee got fired because of an AI review their resume. They are actually within the organization, they still got fired, right? So
first of many, I'm sure.
Yes, the trend is changing. The way things used to be maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago has changed because of the trend in recruiting. I think misalignment or like a wish list of things in job description is making things look like there's too many jobs out there and we can't fulfill them. Because
I want to, before we move on to the next subject, which is certifications, which, is another, one could also call that and associate that with propaganda. I want to do my closing take. I think that there is an undersupply of good security talent. I think that good security talent has aged out of the industry. And I think that that knowledge transfer hasn't happened adequately to other generations that are coming in because of, easier to obtain entries like through certification. So I do think that there is an undersupply of capable and astute security professionals that back in the day, they would try hands-on related. There was kind of self-learn a lot of things. And I do think there's an oversupply of actually really bad security professionals out there that are really clogging up the pipelines and really, to be honest, not being of keen interest to a lot of multinational companies. So that's my hot take.
I have to disagree here.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of organizations, like I know at least two Fortune 200 organizations or of that size that laid off a third of their staff. Those are 60 people laid off because they thought they can outsource the function or because they thought, I need to cut budget, we're just going to cut it.
Yeah.
Large companies, and these are numbers that it's not like, for example, Cisco laying off 15% for operational efficiency or Intel or whatever, also refocusing. These are highly, these for the most part, I'm not saying everybody's good, are highly qualified people. There are some niches where, like, I hate the buzzwords, but properly securing AI, knowing machine learning, some deep things, maybe people who know how to program certain types of systems, there's a specific shortage of.
Agreed.
But for the most part, there are right now a lot of people who were laid off, not because they were bad, not because they were incompetent, but because their organizations decided they need to slash.
Yeah, no, and make no mistake, I'm not saying that people are being laid off because they're bad. I think that when it comes to just the supply issue, right? If you look at supply, I think that if you look at the pool of talent that's out there, I think the majority of the talent, in my opinion, is not good. I think there's a lot of talent that out there that is, moved into the industry. And the same thing happened in the .com era, where you basically had a lot of people getting in to get, the CCNA certifications for Cisco and Microsoft and Oracle and things like that. Because why? Because they were going to make top dollar. And I think for the past 10 years, a lot of people have been coming into cybersecurity for the wrong reasons, trying to and expecting, a high level of compensation, and the market has awarded that. But I think there's definitely a market correction. So
Well,
I think there's two different issues. One is the reason why people are laying off people. I don't think it's because they're bad. I do think that in the pool of supply, I think the predominance of supply is actually not that good, in my opinion.
I think we will agree to disagree and move on. And
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, that's
but
good. That's why we keep it dirty in the Dirty South
yeah,
Cybersecurity
but hey,
Podcast.
Tony and Ira, I just have something that I want to throw in here, and this could be something for another discussions. But I recall that I'm of course in the age of you guys are way ahead of me in numbers, but cybersecurity wasn't really the one of the departments that actually had an attraction with leadership because we were not bringing in money. Like we couldn't prove our worth when it comes to ROI. Do you think that is what is about to happen now when people are being laid off because companies looking to cut budget and they realize, these guys are not bringing in revenue, so they're not bringing money, so we can't tie dollar to their
well,
worth.
so I think that there are CISOs who frankly I need to talk business, but they don't know how to talk business. Because I think CISOs are their own worst enemy in that they do not know how to put a cost benefit. Because I attend a lot of events and talk to CISOs. I think a lot of them, I look at them, I go, you're just a loser. And I'll tell them why. And the reason is they walk in like they are a cost center. They don't walk in like they're a benefit. Like when I was at Walmart, outstanding program. We knew and Walmart knew that without good embedded cybersecurity, we couldn't do business. All of the revenue, the supply chain, everything was based on a proper cybersecurity program being in place. And we were hopefully viewed as a critical enabler by at least management. Other people might not have agreed, but management understood without cybersecurity, the company would fail. Now, other CISOs, do they understand this? Do they know how to put a dollar figure? One of my friends, Dan Meacham at Legendary Entertainment, he has made cybersecurity a profit center in their ability to identify and take down pirated merchandise, as an example. They know how to go ahead and provide a return on investment. They have to figure out, okay, what is the CISO has to understand that they are an enabler, not a cost. And until they can provide that, they're going to portray the wrong function. And I don't disagree that many do. But the reality is people should walk in and say, look, and this is why I joined my current company, because we give people the ability to walk in and say, look, here's the amount of money you're giving me. Here's the return on investment. If you don't want to give me the money I'm asking for, that's your prerogative. You are the management, but it's going to cost you more money in losses. And that's another failing of CISOs in many cases. They portray security, but they don't portray, I'm not doing security. I'm doing risk management. Yeah. I am taking in a budget. I am using a budget to the best of my ability to mitigate losses. And the more I have in theory, the more I'm going to mitigate. But if you take my money away, you take my people away, there's going to be more losses. And again, that's the prerogative of the business. Yeah. But CISOs have to be able to say, if you give me X, I return Y. And if they don't even understand the concept, that's where the bigger problems come in.
100%. Yeah, you're putting down gold, Ira, and you also, really honed in on the risk management aspect, because at a broad level, it's being able to depict that you're not just a cost center, but you're actually a business enabler. But more specifically, you need to be able to speak the risk game, and that level of linguistics is not really at the proficient level for many leaders out there, unfortunately. So let us move on to another subject. As we all know, and we've grown up with a lot of certifications from different organizations. We're not throwing shade at any particular one of them, but there is a full multi-billion-dollar business on certifications. my personal take that it has been largely propaganda, and it hasn't been in the best interest of truly getting professionals ready to understand how to apply security within whatever swim lane they're in, whether it be operations, whether it be leadership, whether it be risk management, whether it be hacking, pen testing, and beyond. Some of them have done better than others because they've had a focus. So the question is, are certifications a learning scam in the industry? Have they been, or truly a conduit to getting started? I know that's kind of a binary question. There's a spectrum in between. So
so first let me ask you a question.
Sure.
What do you call the doctor that graduates at the bottom of their medical school class?
Still call him a doctor.
Call him a doctor. Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of there's two sides to this. There's a lot of misperceptions in industry as to what a certification is and is not. So for example, I have highly criticized ISC squared in the last 2 weeks. I guess now they're ISC 2. But fundamentally, I still believe strongly in the CISSP. And let me give you why. Having been in the business 30 plus years.
But specifically the CISSP only.
Well, CISSP, and I'll tell you the value of the other ones. It'll be implied, or the lack of value in other ones, it'll be implied. CISSP, like around the year 1996 or so, more 97 or so, I saw a job ad, and I already had a CISSP. I was grandfathered into the CISSP, filling out a stack of paperwork. And I was considering, am I going to pay at the time, $85 to renew? Then I wasn't looking for a job, but I saw job ads that said, hey, CISSP required. I'm going to keep that. Because what happened was ISC squared somehow convinced a base of people that having a certification proved that was valuable. Now, then you fast forward to about the year 2000, roughly about 2000, and all these companies were coming into the industry, like Guardant, especially that hellhole. And then you had like CyE and a few others that were basically saying headcount equals potential revenue. And they were handing out business cards to even people who didn't have a high school diploma that said junior cybersecurity analyst. And when they graduated, they became a cybersecurity analyst. And the CISSP was the only thing stopping anyone from putting up a shingle to portray that they had experience. What a CISSP tells me, and I also recommend there was something on Tulsa King, if people don't know, great series in my opinion.
Yeah, it is a great series. Love that show.
Tulsa King, there was a short 20-second segment you can find on YouTube of Sylvester Stallone going on the value of a college degree. Basically, because the degree is completely worthless.
Exactly.
It's the fact, though, that you've showed me that for a period of time, you can show up on schedule, you can do work within the required parameters and do so in a satisfactory way. And hopefully, when I hire you as a college graduate, I will get that same level of minimum assurance. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but with a CISSP, it showed me that somebody has spent time to study, to take a test, to invest their own money into it, who doesn't just think cybersecurity is cool, using my Dr. Evil quotes and saying, give me a good job because cybersecurity is really cool and everybody says I should have a job. It's showing me that there's some devotion. Now, on the other hand, you have some certifications which are, hey, take a class, you're certified. It is what it is. And some people now, are those degrees have any value? For the most part, no. ISC squared goes to DOD, and I think it's now standard 8140. ISC squared certifications seem to be a prerequisite or a requirement for certain positions.
Yeah, but they're also, first to market in the industry as certifications. So, I mean, they do have that luxury of establishing those key relationships, especially with government entities. Listen, I'll agree with you that the CISSP definitely, for all the reasons mentioned, has that level of rigor and aura around it that makes it a little bit more than just a fly-by-night certification. My problem with certifications amongst many is that not necessarily just the organizations that issue them out. It's the false expectation or the belief by the people that seek them that they are entitled to be able to receive compensation, titles, authority, right? Just because simply they have a piece of paper with their name on it and it has a couple different letters following their name. That's my biggest problem with certifications that it creates.
I agree. In that case, those people are morons. I mean, there's fundamentally, you have your expectation that if you get a medical degree, doesn't mean you could do a job. More important, if you get a degree in law, you're still not authorized to practice law. You have to.
I think the two examples are a little bit, so far
Right.
away just because of the amount of time that you have to get in order to get both, right?
Well, in theory, it's about the same amount of time. In theory, not exactly, but in theory, it's about the same amount of time to get a CISSP as it is to get a JD. Then you have to actually take the test, and many lawyers do not pass the bar exam test, where even though they graduate, they do not have the fundamental knowledge. And a lot of lawyers, I think there's some study that says, like 75% of people who have law degrees do not practice law at the moment. And to that same extent, if somebody's selling somebody a fake, or I should say a false sense of entitlement, that once you get a certification, you're guaranteed a job. There was some idiot who happened to be a former US, literally for the president, cybersecurity advisor, who was walking around some meeting saying, if you've got a CISSP, you're employed for life. I asked the person, who is this moron? And they're like, oh, he's so-and-so, the former advisor. I can promise you it wasn't Howard Schmidt. It wasn't Amit Yaron. It wasn't Chris Inglis. You can do the elimination from there. And it wasn't Harry Coker. It wasn't the last woman who served as a temporary. But these people there are some people who have this false sense of entitlement. And a certification is only as good, because what I tell people to see what they actually need for a job is to actually look at job vacancies they want. The job vacancies they want typically tell people what the salary range is. It tells people what the requirements are, which include whether or not it's a college degree, what technologies they need to know, what certifications they need, or so on. And that tells you whether or not something's going to have value. But if you are a moron who just buys somebody's cyber, there are people out there literally who can't keep a job in cybersecurity that are currently selling cybersecurity boot camps and advising. And if you go to them, you deserve what you get, because their LinkedIn profile is pretty obvious that they're bullshit.
Well, I want to segue over to Kofi on this, and Kofi, if you want to close this out and set the, what your thoughts are. But I will say one thing, when I've gone or set up, and running a global cybersecurity firm, we've had people that have been certified with 32 certifications. I kid you not, after their name, don't know why. And then the ones that have 0, right? When it comes to especially the area of adversarial hacking, pen testing, exploit development, and things like that, my 27 years of looking at candidates that come through, the certifications are unfortunately a false sense of confidence, and they're not worth the paper they're written on, in my opinion. Because I've done the bake-off, right? I've gotten the people that have gone the SANS classes and all that stuff, not disrespect to SANS or any other ones. And what the certifications teach you is just simply how to operate in that box. And if you've ever done any level of at least AppSec, pen testing, adversarial hacking, red teaming, you definitely have to think outside the box. And oftentimes I think security warrants that level of mindset where you have to think outside the box. So in the bake-off, in the past, I've seen that the certified ones, they falter, right? They need their swim lines, their floaties, and the ones that are not certified but have the creativeness to understand protocols, RFC specifications, they're the ones that know how to dig down.
Well,
but
I will just, I know we're passing on to Kofi, but let me just make a reply.
Yeah.
I don't look at a certification as, oh, somebody's certified, therefore I'm hiring them.
I don't think anybody does.
I look at the whole body of knowledge, and I look at what do people know, and maybe all things being equal, if somebody spent money on a certification, somebody showed something and it's equal, I'll probably go for the certification. I'm not going to lie. On the other hand, I'm still looking at the person first. The only exception is, and as a consultant, sometimes you have to understand this is a concern. The people who spent the money to get the certification, some clients are specifically in the course of contracts asking for certifications. For example, Crest, like, especially in the
That's different. That's an accreditation, right? They're not really
well,
clients. They're an
I
accreditation.
certification, accreditation, all the
Right.
same to me. Doesn't mean that an organization that's not Crest certified is any better or worse than somebody else. But the thing is, if there is a requirement, which could be, for example, a due diligence, you get hacked. First thing a class action
Yeah, but
attorney
I mean, to
pulls
your
out of the
point, it's
sewer is
not a
going to
single
ask is,
variable. I
are
mean,
you doing
I'm on the vice chair of the board of Crest. I don't know if you know this, and so specifically for pen testing, and it's to your point. I mean, I'm going to recite what exactly you put down. It's one variable.
Exactly. But the point is that if you're finding people who are certified and just rely on that, that tells me they don't have experience to begin with, that they
Yeah.
are holding up a sheet of paper and you're looking at the whole. When I hire people, and my favorite deputy I've ever hired, because when I go in, I always try to bring somebody in, did not have a college degree. I doubt he was ever took the time to be certified, but he was the person I trusted most because when I hire people, I'm hiring people to protect my reputation, if nothing
Yeah.
else. And whether or not they have the abilities, that's one thing. If I had a client that said they need somebody with a college degree, I can't change the contracts.
Yeah,
But
playing devil's. I want to give this to Kofi because I mean,
yeah,
otherwise this will
sorry.
be a conversation you and I. So
Yeah,
Kofi, go ahead and jump in here. What do you got?
yeah. So I think the pioneers in certification did a great job with marketing and PR roles in the likes of ISC Square and some other institutions. And the whole industry bought into it to the extent that it became a requirement for some job positions. But we're in cybersecurity where things do change every second, every minute, every hour, whatever, right? The things that these certifications are teaching me most of the time are out of date by the time I take those certifications and may not be
It's true.
applicable in a real world. Heck, I've seen some of these well-renowned institutions and their course content, and they're teaching stuff that are way old. All right. So somebody walks into job, and personally, I have managed people with these certifications that on their first day just knocked out a client's infrastructure because they came with this whole, holding these certifications and they thought they were good enough. So the PR and marketing cannot be downplayed. This guy did a great job to have themselves embedded into these organizations, and the human resources all fell for these things. That is why sometimes, and I mean, for me, for instance, I had been on some organizations where some clients, and by the way, I came from consulting field with a big four, PwC, EY, and the likes, right? And there are some engagements that had that particular requirement of only CSSP certified consultants should be on those engagements. And of course, I had CSSP at the time, right? But I realized that the things that I had to study for that certifications were not applicable anymore in what I was doing.
Exactly.
All right. They were no longer applicable. So what are we doing though from us as leadership, such as Ira and yourself as Tony, who do hire? What I do in my case is I write my own job descriptions for my team when I have to recruit. And I weed out any certification requirement because the guy who wrote Mimikatz doesn't have certification. Those guys who wrote great tools that we use nowadays in our jobs do not have certifications. The guys who wrote all this is way in the back do not have any of these certifications. So I would have to write my own job description and then find a way to assess the skill set of my resources. If you have certification, that's fine. But I can guarantee you that I've hired some good guys who had no certifications and they were great at whatever they do. So again, it depends. It depends on how you view it. There are still some good certs out there, but the question is, how relevant are they in the current situation? And I don't think They are. In fact, I stopped paying my certification fees for all of these, and I just had like all of them out because I didn't see the value in having this anymore in my title because they were not relevant in what I do. And for most of
Exactly.
people, they're not. And that is
Yeah,
my take.
you're putting down a lot of things that are true. I mean, the certifications don't move at the rate of what we need in operations and security programs, period. I mean, I don't think there's any debate there. There's no one that would debate the opposite of that, right? It's impossible. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's some good points that everyone put down with respect to certifications. I do want to move on to the other two topics that we have. This is definitely, a full sitting on the Dirty South Cybersecurity podcast. Let's quickly go into two remaining points. One is on globalization. It's taking a lot of businesses by storm. It's really kind of the outsourcing 2.0. There's a lot of opportunities with globalization, and this goes back to supply and demand on resources. Let's take some hot takes. Let's go back to you, Ira. What's working and what's not as you see, you're working for a multinational company. You guys have market presence, maybe team members around the world. What do you think is working? What do you think is not working as the world, especially in tech, continues to grow in the globalization route? Or do you think that it's going to revert back to something else?
So here's the fundamental problem. There's a lot of people, you could say there's talent overseas, some of it's good, but fundamentally, the fact is, I have not seen talent as consistently good as it is in the United States and other parts of the areas that I deal with. Because these people just come through with different experiences, different pedigrees, different hands on job experience. Where, for example, when you look at people who are managing just like an Indian development center, some of those, again, individually, they might be great. The problem has been that the standards that they've been expected to live with have been a lot less than you would hope. That, for example, one reason they're in place where they are is because lower salaries. It's lower salaries, lower expectations come with those salaries because they're like, look, we expect to pay developers 25 an hour. And if something goes wrong with their software, we pay somebody else 25 an hour to fix it. And then that's better than paying somebody 125 an hour like we might in the United States. And these people could be better, but the expectations everybody has for them are low. If you have a kid that you say, look, I don't care, just graduate high school. That kid, unless they are super motivated in a way you don't expect from a child, is not going to excel. On the other hand, you have a parent who expects their child to go to college, who expects their child to be in honors classes and AP classes. That child may not have the ability, but they're going to be pushed to levels that they otherwise would not go up, they would not get to. And what I've seen from overseas job markets is that they're not pushing people to be better. They're pushing
Ira,
people.
let me ask you a question. What are the top three countries that you think have supported a consistent, besides the United States? So, or maybe there's another country that supplants the United States in terms of specifically cybersecurity talent and work ethic and things like that. What are your top three?
So top three, if you were to ask me, Israel's number one.
Okay.
United States is number two.
Right.
And then I'd probably put, that's a hard one. It's probably kind of sort of a tie between UK, Germany, and Canada.
Okay.
For companies that have really tried to push what I would call excellence in cybersecurity from what I've seen.
Kofi, would you agree with some of the points made by Ira? And what's your top three?
Yes, I would agree with most of it. My top three, I have done some work with Israeli, resources. So definitely great. I wouldn't have the same experience number of years as Ira does. So I would say US, Israel, of course, and then top three is going to be difficult because I've done some work in the UK, Spain, India, and the Philippines. I've had some good guys, but yes, I'll say UK, Spain. Yeah, Yeah, I'll say so. Yeah, those two.
Let me ask you a follow-up question because I know that you are from Central Africa, Kofi. So I wanted
West
to
Africa.
get West Africa. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
What do you foresee? I mean, Africa's coming up in globalization in the realm of technology and cybersecurity. How fast do you expect Africa to be able to come to at least an entry level of performance of consistency? And what countries in Africa do you think are going to surge at the top?
I would say actually above entry level. Individually, the resources are talented, and I'll borrow from Ira's, argument about expectations. Okay, if you set lower expectations for people, they will try to do whatever you're expecting them, unless they
Mhm.
are motivated. And you and I have had these conversations before that I have come across really talented guys in Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa, who are great at what we do when it comes to OffSec individually. So if we're evaluating based on the country or the continent, it may not look great for the country or the continent, but the individual because we don't have much support from leadership as a country, but individually these guys are well talented, and that is why when they travel outside their confinement of the country and they go to other places like US or Canada or whatever, they excel. So individually, we have great talent, but we don't have the support. And if we were to be able to have a great support, I would say we'll go beyond what you see right now for the continent of Africa when it comes to
Well, I'm
cybersecurity.
gonna I'm gonna assign, countries by type of talent. I will agree that Israel is top. I would associate them more with product security, exploit dev. I think that United States is really good with dev ops or DevSecOps. And in terms of OffSec, I'm going to throw a curveball and say that Argentina has proven to be a pretty reliable resource for adversarial engagements there. And I think that the community, especially in Buenos Aires, has a really good culture. They've had the Echo Party conference for the past, 15 years or so, where it's been really a vibrant community for hacking in the right mindset. But I think that there's not going to be a one particular country that solves it all. Ira, do you think that globalization will continue to trick upward as a way of displacing Western talent, or do you think that it's going to plateau or actually revert back? Like we've seen some level of traditional outsourcing actually revert back in other non-cybersecurity, non-tech related stuff. What do you think?
Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to revert back. I think a lot of people are using cybersecurity as a commodity. And when they look at it as a commodity, they'll look to put it in China. They'll look to put it in the Philippines.
Mhm.
They'll look to put it in low cost areas where they can potentially outsource, like India. There might be a concern at periods of time where, do I really want to trust a person in India or especially China with the geopolitical situations going on there,
Right.
do my cybersecurity and pull it back to the US? And that's that's something of how much do we have organizational trust? I mean, I remember, for example, I'm dating myself, but when Checkpoint was first coming out as one of the first firewall vendors, the US Department of Defense said, hey, they're a great firewall everybody's using, but they won't let us look at the source code. And we're not going to trust Israel to not put back doors in it. And so they stopped acquisition from Israeli companies for a period of time. So
Well, around that time, they also allowed Kaspersky into the U.S. market for SMB. So go figure.
yeah, I'm not going to say there's a lot of logic that, organizations have in this field. It's just a matter of which organizations are going to be cost, you know, sensitive. And I'll give a quick example. When I was at NSA, and I was at NSA in an R&D group where we were tasked to do special things periodically. And one guy complained to me that all of a sudden he's like, these people asked me to do something, a month ago, and now they haven't mentioned it, but now they're asking me, why isn't it done yet? I'm like, well, why isn't it done? He's like, well, I never got to it. So anyway, I'm like, okay, get to it. And then it was like, then the next day I go back. So did you get them what they need? He's like, well, I wrote it, but now I'm going to rewrite it in assembly language for it to go faster. And I felt like strangling the guy, except for the fact he didn't report to me, because I'm like, what the hell? They don't care if it's faster, they need it. And that is kind of the unfortunate mindset. If you have somebody that's going to push stuff out and need quick responses immediately, they're not going to let this idiot rewrite everything in assembly code. But there are people who want to rewrite things in assembly code. And the more you take away their freedom to do things more effectively and more efficiently, even if you think it's stupid, the more you're going to have a problem with it.
Yeah.
And I'm just using that as an example that can be generalized to, well, if you have somebody who's like, look, I pay you $25 an hour. I want you to get 7 projects an hour done, not 2 projects an hour done. This is what you're going to get.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up with the last topic, which, and I like the globalization, the geopolitical stuff that you really spoke about, because I think that's really kind of an underserved and underregarded aspect to these types of global relationships. But looking at now AI and less on the human realm and more the artificial realm, there is a lot of conversations that I have with leaders in multinational companies that are commissioned by their superiors to say, you have to demonstrate how we can take AI to be able to create greater efficiencies in what we're doing operationally. It's not just security, right? It's other areas of the business. So number one question for you both is, are you hearing the same sort of rhetoric being discussed, or not rhetoric, but really sort of plans or calls to action by senior level executives, advisors, board members to some of their underlings, asking them to be able to operationalize AI in means and ways that can save the company money, A, and B, what are some realistic things that we can expect in 2025 for AI to really have an impact on as we think about a security program, everything from defense to offense to risk management and beyond?
So this is my pet peeve. AI is my pet peeve.
Okay.
Because fundamentally, everybody says AI, 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 like it's an entity. AI is not an entity. AI are certain sets of mathematical equations in different realms. There is no one AI. These are mathematical equations that, when taking big data and the available processing capability, can approximate what might be human intelligence in certain ways. And people need to understand that what we're talking about is the implementation of mathematical algorithms that can improve efficiency. And too many people take that concept away and just give it as AI, as this mythical entity that's going to take our jobs, violate privacy, or whatever.
So let me just level set, because AI just makes it a little bit more succinct than saying everything that you just said was absolutely true. But for the purposes of the conversation, there's an implied understanding that everyone listening to this has done their homework, that there is an algorithmic, piece to applying to data, right? And loads of data to be able to simulate, human reasoning, human deduction, human analysis, so forth. So everything you said stands, but
I don't think people actually understand that, because during ISC squared, coming back to that, I gave a presentation on the last day. I go, how many of you attended a presentation up to this point, like 4 or more presentations that discussed AI? Everybody raised their hands. I go, how many people can actually tell me what AI is?
Okay.
3 people raised their hands in an audience of 200 people. People do not actually understand what AI is, because when they talk about how can I make things more efficient, it's like, I need to understand what are the mathematical algorithms available with the data to me that can simulate or approximate human thought or other programs that could be run more efficiently and function in a more way. Because when they talk about AI violating privacy, which is what they're doing, AI is no different in violating privacy than any other algorithm we have. AI just is managed to be able to take in more variables and process them more efficiently to come to better decisions.
I think that with AI, the advent of AI introduces decisioning, which is a big difference compared to some of the other algos that we've had in the past and since the 1980s that, do some level of analysis. Decisioning is a big deal, but let me rephrase the question. Assuming that everything that you put down as a definition of AI, just going back to mathematical, when you did geometry in high school, you had the given, right? So the given is that we have an expectation of what AI is, right? There is mathematical algorithms that are designed to basically evaluate data sets and make some level of decision or analysis for some sort of upstream operational, outcome. So with that, let's go back to the question. What are some realistic, assuming that given, right? And I know that's a perfect world. So we don't live in that perfect world, and for all the reasons that you mentioned, but assuming that given, what silos in the security program are most to be affected in the coming year?
If you're talking about programs in cybersecurity,
yes,
theoretically, code assessment should be, and security assessment should be impacted. Likewise, and I'm not, because frankly, AI is going to generate the code to begin with, let alone having AI analyze the security of the code more effectively. Because we've been using AI operationally for decades now in cybersecurity, such as anti-malware has been fundamentally an AI type of function. SOC decision-making, low-level decision-making, where people can go ahead and start looking at multiple variables and much more quickly and effectively determine what are anomalous behaviors that can be potentially indicative of a problem. And we're not just talking about, for example, like a SOC. We're talking about, for example, going through data sets and looking for fraud as well. There's a product, something like Conceal or Reveal or something like that. They're basically cluster analysis to go ahead and look at how somebody interacts with a system and be able to fundamentally say their interaction with the system is outside norms of normal behavior.
But that's more, so I think a better example, so that's anomaly detection. And so when you talked about the comparisons to malware analysis, at first it started with signature-based analysis, which is archaic, and then you have anomaly detection. But I think with the fraud example, which is a great one, it's looking at how actually fraud happens and looking at the different variations of how fraud happens, and having that data to be analyzed by a mathematical algorithm to be able to say what sort of patterns exist for online fraud in retail, fraud in F&B, fraud in hospitality, et cetera, fraud in trading systems to happen. And then beyond that, the AI model to be able to produce predictive analysis, which is the game changer, right? That is the net new.
Well, again, you could argue net new, but I don't know about you, but I've been getting fraud alerts, for example, in credit card usage for more than a decade.
If we're going to have advancements, I don't know what type of card you have. I mean, Amex is definitely decent, but if they're anywhere close to some of the other cards I have, then that's basically a shit show when it comes to AI in the future.
Well, what I'm saying though is that what we have is an enhancement of a lot of applications that are essentially doing the same things. Because if you're asking for 2025, we're not really going to have anything that's revolutionary.
Okay.
We're going to have evolutionary improvements. We're going to have evolutionary improvements in the tools, like I said, that we're already using for SOAR, for example, versus SIM. We're going to have evolutionary in fraud detection. We're going to have evolutionary in misuse and abuse detection, identity management. We're going to have a whole bunch of things, for example, security awareness. Companies have already gone ahead and, for example, implemented machine learning algorithms to better tailor awareness content to individual users, as an example. And these are things that could be enhanced because, again, AI essentially
That's a great point. That's a great point.
More data and process it more effectively. These are mathematical algorithms that have been around for decades, but they just haven't been practical because we didn't have the data sources, the access to the data sources, and most important, the ability to process complicated algorithms against countless attributes, which is why NVIDIA is worth $3 trillion or whatever it is today, because their chipsets make it practical to implement algorithms that are decades old and were impractical, that needed, I can joke, a supercomputer, which is, previously.
Those are strong points, Ira. I'd stand up, but I'm wearing shorts. But Kofi, I'm going to give this to you for your points, and then I'm going to give Ira a teaser to close us out about the inequalities of AI adoption and use, given who are the countries that have the predominance for access to the hardware, to the infrastructures, and what that means for a disequilibrium in the global economy, or from a geopolitical standpoint. But Kofi, what are your thoughts on what is, and I love the point that Ira made, right? It's not a revolution, it's an evolution. I love that point.
It's all about efficiency. So going back to your question, I think you did ask us if we're getting any messages from either our clients or leadership on how we can integrate AI into our existing workflow or whatever. I would say yes. Myself coming from OffSec background and managing a team, yes, I've had leadership reaching out and asking, well, by the way, what you guys do, have you come across some tools that do integrate AI into your process, or have you thought about having that into your process to make your work much more efficient, right? So yes, that is happening with with some organizations, including myself. The next one too is, are we going to see any changes in 2025? I think there's going to be new things. It's just going to be evolution, but we're just still going to see like creative ways that AI is being used, with whether you are offensive or defensive. An example is, I've seen a couple of some phishing campaigns which are solely driven by AI, right? That are much more unique, we haven't seen before, right? So we're going to see those things happening within the the next couple coming years when it comes to OffSec. And of course, we'll have also some defensive security, because we are now going to have some automation built into our IR and detection capabilities to make things much more faster and efficient than what we used to do right now. As far as if we go to have something out of like this, out of what we have currently, that is difficult to tell. I mean, Blu-ray came out and we're all buzzing around it. We thought it was going to be, the biggest, thing, but look away, it got us. It didn't live up to its expectations. We had 3D movies came up and we thought it was going to be big thing, the next thing for movie experience, and that didn't. So I think it's too early for us to, for the next 2025, fine, but the foreseeable future, that is hard to tell. But yes, we're going to see some evolution, but we may see a little bit of some crazy things coming in that we didn't expect with AI.
Ira, you can close this out. What are your thoughts on the disequilibrium of AI adoption and use by different countries and their respective economies and the companies that are behind those countries, in terms of having equal access to, right, the types of infrastructure, and who becomes the steward of these infrastructures, whether it's Amazon, Microsoft, etc. What are your thoughts there to kind of close this out on this one?
So this one, I mean, China is the sleeping dragon, as my friend once called it a while ago. China, it has incredible amounts of computing power. They have incredible amounts of talent. They have a lot of capability there. The United States, again, has massive computing power, which is required to do all this AI. It has the contractors and organizations that are currently going to do it. Frankly, I don't see much of a divide, or I don't see much of a change in who are going to be the powerhouses moving forward. For example, Russia's the 10th ranked country in the world from GDP perspective. California has a bigger economy than Russia. You're not going to see, they have a lot of smart people. They're limited by the amount of resources they have, but they do have good resources within the government, and the Russian government is probably going to start making use of AI. The rest of the world, Europe, they're a financial powerhouse as well. And they're going to be able to get sufficient computing resources. They're going to have some talent. I don't see a lot of the innovations that are going to come out of there as much as probably going to come out of the United States and China, as an example. Because you have to look at who are the innovators, who are going to profit from innovation, and who are going to be the users. And for the most part, you're not going to see too much of a radical shift, in my opinion. You're going to have the cheaper countries like the Philippines, India, and everywhere else, which are going to go ahead and make use of the technology that's given to them to provide cheaper labor, which isn't going to be as much of a problem with AI to a certain extent, that a lot of them might be displaced where non-humans are feasible, or where non-humans are not as or where displaced where non-humans are feasible. But at the same time, the innovations are coming out of the United States. The United States is well ahead of China and everywhere else at this point with regard to AI. I mean, the politicians want to say China is ahead. From what I heard from people who know, they're not. We have more power, we have more knowledge and brain sets, but where the technology is today is going to be where the AI innovations are coming from tomorrow, if that's the answer to your question. And I'll shut up there.
Yeah. I mean, it was more of really of a disequilibrium. I think there's going to be a greater disequilibrium and where you have the stewards of this technology. You think about Nvidia, right, and the manufacturer of that, and their stock basically blowing up because of what the future holds for them. China is going to want to have their own version as something to because they're going to distrust just what happened with like Intel, right? Chipsets, right? They're going to say, I don't trust this chipset, so I want to copy it and make sure that we have our own that is done here and it can basically support our own, private country endeavors and things like that. I do think that similar to the long debated topic of IANA, right, and DNS, right, and things like that, and the internet overall, when largely it was governed by the United States, right after the Bell days and the advent of the internet. There's going to be a similar type of difficulty for other countries in other third world countries and up and coming countries to be able to build organically their own infrastructure and their own data sets, their own computing power, and most importantly, the following: the more dependable infrastructure. You're still talking about the majority of the world that oftentimes doesn't even have reliable electricity, right? And coming from my family in Latin America and in parts of Africa, those types of things are still very much a real issue, even though when you're in big metropolitan cities like Sao Paulo or Buenos Aires or whatever. So I think this is concerning for a lot of countries to say, are we going to rely on the United States? What is the United States' interest in governing all of this? If it's the United States, it could be a coalition of United States related countries and things like that. I do think it's a reasonable concern, and actually one thing to look ahead as we put out the 2025 Envisions geopolitical risk report that we come out with every year at Versprite. So that's a shameless plug there. But this has been a full sitting on the Dirty South Security Podcast. Ira, much appreciated to you. Kofi, always great to rock it with you. Looking forward to, please check out Ira's CISOs on a cruise or CruiseCon. Sorry. CruiseCon. I almost gave it the same depiction of like snakes on a plane, which is horrible, right? Because but this is CruiseCon.
CruiseCon, DefCon, just
exactly.
I actually paid $8,000 for the domain to make it sure it was easy to remember.
Okay.
So,
well, we'll definitely have it here listed on the Dirty South Security Podcast, and we hope that there's a strong uptick, and that's next February, right?
February 8th through 13th. Yep.
Excellent. Ira, great seeing you again. Thanks, Kofi, and take care, guys.
All righty, Ira. All righty.
We're in sync. Make this moment never shrink.